The text message contained exactly 7 words. Mum, don't come. They don't want you here. I turned onto the gravel road of the farm I had purchased. A truck blocked the gate. My daughter stood behind the fence, weeping like she had been stripped of her soul. I have signed deals that changed the city skyline, but that night I realized someone inside that house thought I was just a senile old woman ready to be fleeced. My name is Marianne Caldwell. At 58 years old, I had successfully navigated the shark-infested waters of commercial real estate long enough to know when the water was turning red, and I had the scars to prove it. I was semi-retired now, a woman who had traded boardrooms for garden planning. Yet the instinct for a bad deal had never left my blood. I believed in generosity, but I also believed that unconditional love was the only thing in this world that should be free. Everything else required a contract. However, when it came to my daughter, Harper, my ironclad rules often turned into suggestion. I had bought the farm in Blue Hollow, Vermont, for her. It was a sprawling piece of land that smelled of pine needles and damp earth, a place for new beginnings. Harper was 32, but in the presence of her husband's family, she often looked like a frightened child. I wanted this farm to be her spine. I wanted it to be the ground beneath her feet that nobody could pull away. It was a gift designed to help her restart her life after years of suffocating under the heavy, judgmental thumb of the Ashford family. I was scheduled to drive up the next morning for what they called the sponsor appreciation party. The title itself irked me, making me sound like a corporate donor rather than a mother. But I had agreed for Harper's sake. Then the message arrived. My phone buzzed on the granite countertop. I picked it up, expecting a request for a last-minute menu change. Instead, I read the text from Harper. Mom, don't come. They don't want you here. I stared at the words. They were cowardly little things, glowing on the screen. I dialed Harper's number immediately. It rang and rang until the automated voicemail picked up. I hung up and dialed Dylan, my son-in-law. He sent me straight to voicemail. My jaw tightened. I scrolled down to Felicity. Harper's mother-in-law. One ring, then a click. The line went dead. She had blocked me. I stood in the center of my kitchen, the silence of the house amplifying the sudden thudding of my heart. On the table sat a polished wooden box. Inside lay the deed to the farm, bound in a velvet folder, and a second gift I had spent weeks preparing. It was a set of antique wind chimes, copper and heavy wood, restored to perfect pitch. I had imagined them hanging on the porch, singing in the wind, a voice for Harper when she could not find her own. Now, the box looked like a coffin for a dead dream. Why would a simple gift make them panic? Why lock the doors against the person handing them the keys? A soft ping from my laptop drew my attention. A new email had landed in my inbox. I walked over, my movements mechanical. The subject line read, "Confirmation of owner profile update." I frowned. I checked the timestamp. The request had been processed at 2:13 in the morning. I had been asleep at 2:13. I clicked open the details. The email confirmed that the contact information and primary authorization for the Blue Hollow property had been altered. The air in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. This was not a glitch. This was not a mistake. My hands did not shake. Instead, a cold clarity washed over me, the same feeling I used to get right before I decimated a competitor who tried to breach a contract. I did not wait for morning. I did not wait to be invited. I grabbed the wooden box and my car keys. This was no longer a family dispute. This was a coordinated strike. 10 minutes later, I was on the interstate, driving north into the black mouth of the night. The road was empty, the only light coming from my high beams cutting through the darkness. My mind replayed the last few months like a grainy film reel. I thought of the way Harper would start to say something during our phone calls, her voice rising with a hint of rebellion, only to cut herself off. I could almost hear the invisible check being tugged on her collar. In the Ashford house, being loved was a transaction, and the price was total submission. "You think I'm just an old woman writing checks," I said to the empty passenger seat. "You're about to find out exactly how I made that money." I pressed down on the gas pedal. I was coming to take back what was mine, or burn it down, so they couldn't have it either. I pulled up to the property just as the sun was bleeding over the ridge. It was 7 in the morning. The fog was lifting off the pasture, revealing the farmhouse that was supposed to be Harper's sanctuary. But the first thing that hit me was the banner strung between the 2 old oak trees. It was professionally printed on heavy vinyl. It read, "Ashford Family Appreciation Day." Beneath it, in font so small it looked like a disclaimer, were the words, "Hosted by Harper." My hands gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. They had not just taken over the party, they had rebranded the ownership. I stepped out of the car. The iron gate, which I had left secured with a simple padlock 2 weeks ago, now sported a heavy-duty electronic chain lock. A man in a yellow security vest stood on the other side, holding a clipboard. He looked bored. "I am Marianne Caldwell," I said, my voice steady. "Open the gate." He looked down at his list, running a finger along the names. He didn't even look up when he answered. "You aren't on the access list, ma'am. Private event. Only family and registered guests." "I am her mother," I said, stepping closer to the bars. "And I bought this land." "Name is not here," he repeated, closing the clipboard. I looked past him. The farmhouse was about 50 yards away, through the gaps in the white picket fence that separated the driveway from the backyard. I saw her. Harper was standing near the porch steps. She looked like a ghost against the dark wood of the barn. Her face was pale, drained of blood, and she was clutching her phone against her chest like a shield. She was crying, but it was that terrible, silent weeping where the shoulders shake, but no sound comes out. "Harper!" I called out. She jolted. She looked toward the gate, her eyes wide and terrified. She walked toward me, not running, but moving with the heavy, dragging steps of someone walking through water. She stopped 5 feet from the gate, afraid to come closer. "Mum," she whispered. Her voice was cracked. "They told me to sign some papers. For tax procedures. I didn't understand. Then they said the farm isn't mine anymore." My stomach dropped. Tax procedures. The oldest trick in the book for preying on the financially illiterate. Before I could respond, the screen door of the porch slammed open. Felicity Ashford stepped out. At 7:30 in the morning, in the middle of rural Vermont. She was wearing a silk dress suitable for a cocktail lounge, complete with a pearl necklace. She walked over to Harper, not rushing, claiming the space with every step. "Marianne," Felicity said. Her tone was smooth, like oil on a skillet. "You making a scene out here only makes Harper look bad. We are trying to establish standing in this community." Grant Ashford followed her out. He was a large man who wore his arrogance like a suit of armor. He stood next to his wife, crossing his arms. Go home. Marianne, Grant said. His voice was deep and devoid of warmth. A gift is a gift. Once given, ownership transfers. Now our family manages it properly. We are just doing what is best for the asset. I looked at Dylan. My son-in-law was standing a few feet behind Harper. He didn't put a hand on her shoulder to comfort her. He didn't step between her and his parents. He just stood there, hands in his pockets, looking at the ground before flicking his gaze to me. Dylan, I said, open this gate. He shifted his weight. He looked at Harper, his eyes narrowing slightly. Don't make this hard for everyone. Just go inside. Harper flinched. It was a tiny movement, but I saw it. It was the reaction of a woman who had been told 1,000 times that her feelings were an inconvenience to the people who claimed to love her. I was about to shout, to summon the police, to tear the gate down with my bare hands, when my eyes caught something pasted on the side of the red barn wall, just behind Grant's shoulder. It was a bright orange piece of paper, the kind used for official municipal notices. I squinted. It was a public hearing notice from the county planning board. Even from this distance, the bold black header was legible to anyone who had spent decades reading construction permits. It scheduled a meeting for next week regarding a change of land use application. The breath left my lungs. They did not want the farm. They wanted the land entitlement. They were not managing an asset. They were liquidating a home. I looked at Harper, who was shivering despite the morning sun, and then at the Ashfords, who stood like gatekeepers to a fortress I had paid for. I realized then that shouting would solve nothing. They had the paperwork, they had the possession, and they had my daughter convinced she was crazy for questioning them. I needed to stop being a mother at the gate. I needed to become what they feared most, a creditor with a grudge. I managed to get Harper away from the gate and into a booth at a diner called the Copper Kettle on the edge of town. The place smelled of burnt bacon and stale coffee, but it was neutral ground. Harper sat opposite me, wrapping her hands around a mug of hot water as if it were the only anchor keeping her from drifting away. "Tell me exactly how it happened," I said. My voice was low, leaving no room for evasion. Harper looked down at the table. It was late. Dylan came home angry. He said his parents were furious about the tax implications of the gift. He told me. He said if I didn't sign the waiver immediately, the audit would ruin his credit score, and he would lose his promotion at the firm. And you signed it. I was scared. Mum. They were all standing there. Felicity kept saying, "We are just trying to protect you from yourself, Harper." I just wanted them to stop staring at me. I reached across the table and took her phone. I navigated to her recent files. She had a scan of the document she had signed. The header looked innocent enough, Family Asset Optimization Agreement. But as I pinched the screen to zoom in on the fine print of paragraph 4, my blood ran cold. It was not a tax waiver. It was a durable power of attorney granting full management rights, including the right to list and liquidate real property, to a designated agent. I dialed Evelyn Shaw immediately. Evelyn was not just my lawyer. She was a shark who specialized in agricultural real estate and family trusts. I put the phone on speaker, keeping the volume low. "I am looking at the document you just forwarded." "Marianne," Evelyn said. Her voice was crisp. "This is nasty work. The language is deliberately obtuse. It is not just a sale authorization. It is a total transfer of decision-making power. There are signs of a setup to seize control, not just sell. They are trying to bypass the deed entirely. I hung up and paid the bill. Come with me, I told Harper. We drove to the Alder County Land Registry. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead as I walked up to the counter. I requested a transcript of the property filings for the last 48 hours. The clerk, a woman with tired eyes, handed me a printout. I scanned the lines. There it was. The temporary managing representative listed for the Blue Hollow Farm was not Harper. It was Felicity Ashford. Wait, the clerk said, tapping her computer screen. Are you here about the geological survey permit too? The one for the cold storage project? I froze. What cold storage project? The application was submitted yesterday, the clerk replied, turning the monitor slightly so I could see. Request to rezone 3 acres for industrial warehouse use. Applicant is Dylan Ashford. My son-in-law was not protecting his credit score. He was developing a commercial facility on land he did not own. I pulled out my phone and accessed the banking app where I had set up a joint monitoring view for Harper's initial farm expenses. I refreshed the transaction history. There was a pending deposit from a sender named Redwood Meridian Holdings. The amount was $25,000. It had been wired into a new sub-account labeled Harper and Dylan, an account Harper clearly knew nothing about. I showed the screen to Harper. Who is Redwood Meridian? She shook her head, her face crumbling. I don't know. I don't know anything. Mom? Dylan told me. He said I wasn't smart enough to run a business. He said I didn't have the vision for it. She covered her face with her hands, sobbing quietly in the middle of the government office. I thought they wanted to help me, but they just think I am useless. I looked at the deposit slip on the screen again. Redwood Meridian was a commercial developer. The Ashfords were not trying to help Harper manage a farm. They were flipping the land for a quick profit before the ink on the deed was even dry. I placed a hand on Harper's back. It was not a hug. It was a brace. I realized then that this was not a family dispute. It was a hostile corporate takeover disguised as a marriage intervention. They had isolated the shareholder, forged the consensus, and were now liquidating the assets. They did not use guns or threats. They used politeness and a pen. And they had made one fatal error. They assumed the mother of the victim was just another helpless spectator. Let me see the original binder, I said. My voice had lost its maternal softness. It was now the voice I used when a contractor tried to overcharge me for concrete. Harper reached into her tote bag and pulled out the heavy wooden box I had given her weeks ago. She handed it to me with trembling hands. I opened it, bypassing the sentimental wind chimes, and pulled out the thick sheaf of legal documents. I flipped past the ceremonial cover page to the actual filing status. There it was, in black and white. The Caldwell Revocable Trust. I had not transferred the deed directly to Harper's name. I had transferred the property into a trust where she was the primary beneficiary, but I remained the trustee with revocation rights. It was a safety mechanism I had installed instinctively, a habit born from 30 years of watching fortunes vanish due to bad marriages and worse decisions. I had intended to sign over full trustee powers to her at the party as the final gesture of the gift. The Ashfords had made a critical error. They had rushed to force her signature on a sale document, not realizing that Harper did not yet legally possess the authority to sell the land without my countersign. They were trying to sell a car they had only borrowed. I pulled out my phone. The crying mother was gone. The negotiator had taken the wheel. I dialed the private client line for my bank. "This is Marianne Caldwell," I said. I am flagging a deposit of $25,000 into the joint account ending in 442. The source is Redwood Meridian Holdings. Mark it for suspected fraud under duress. Freeze the account immediately. I hung up before the manager could ask for details. I dialed Evelyn next. Evelyn, send a formal notice of dispute to the Alder County Registry of Deeds, I commanded. Copy the legal department at Redwood Meridian. Inform them that the title to the Blue Hollow property is contested, and that any attempt to alter the land use will be met with immediate litigation. Make them afraid to even park a truck on that dirt. Consider it done, Evelyn replied. But Marianne, if we push too hard, they might destroy the house out of spite. Let them try, I said. I had one more call to make. For the past 2 years, I had allowed Dylan to work as an internal consultant for my company, Caldwell Rural Ventures. I had created the position to give him dignity, a steady income, and something to put on his resume. It was a charity masquerading as a job. I called my operations director. Terminate Dylan Ashford's consulting agreement. Revoke his credentials. Is there a reason for the file? Marianne? He asked. Breach of trust, I said. As I waited for the confirmation, I opened the access logs on my tablet. My stomach turned. Dylan had not just been collecting a paycheck. He had been querying my internal database. He had accessed my proprietary valuation models for the Vermont region. The realization hit me like a physical blow. He had used my own data, my research, my market analysis to pitch the farm to Redwood Meridian. He had used my resources to figure out exactly how much he could get for betraying my daughter. I set the phone down on the table. The anger was there, boiling beneath the surface, but I capped it. Anger made you sloppy. I needed to be precise. Mom? Harper asked. She was wiping her eyes with a napkin. What are you doing? Are we going back to yell at them? No, I said. I smoothed the tablecloth. Yelling is for people who have no power. If we scream, they will dig in. We are going to let them think I am just a confused old woman who doesn't understand the paperwork. We are going to let them think they have won. I needed them confident. I needed them to walk into the room thinking they held all the cards, so they wouldn't see the trap door until they were falling through it. I reached across the table and grabbed Harper's chin, forcing her to look me in the eye. Her face was a map of misery, but I saw the spark of the girl she used to be buried somewhere deep inside. Harper, listen to me carefully, I said. You don't need permission to be respected. I will do the legal part. You just need to stand up straight. The invitation arrived on my phone with a digital flourish of gold calligraphy. It was titled Family Reconciliation Brunch and was set for noon at the Gilded Oak, the most pretentious restaurant in the county. It was a classic power move. They were offering me a seat at the table they believed they now owned, framing it as an act of benevolence toward a meddling mother-in-law. I accepted. But I did not go alone. I brought Evelyn Shaw, introducing her simply as an old friend from the city, and Miles Cutter, a man whose rugged flannel shirt belied his PhD in agricultural soil management. I introduced him as a driver I had hired for the day. The Ashfords, too absorbed in their own performance, barely glanced at them. We sat at a round table covered in white linen. The air smelled of expensive perfume and roasted duck. Felicity sat with her back to the window, ensuring the light caught her diamond earrings. We just want peace, Marianne, Felicity said, unfolding her napkin with practiced grace. Harper is a sweet girl, but we both know she is fragile. She needs a steady hand to guide her. She gets overwhelmed by simple household budgets, let alone running a working farm. Grant nodded, cutting into his steak with surgical precision. Exactly. It is about asset optimization. Leaving prime real estate to sit idle is negligent. We are merely structuring the holding for maximum yield. I looked at Harper. She was staring at her plate, pushing a single pea around with her fork. She looked smaller than I had ever seen her. Mom, Dylan said, looking at me with wide, earnest eyes. I am just trying to protect Harper's future. If we don't handle the taxes and the zoning now, we could lose everything. You know how the market is. Harper said nothing. Her silence was a physical weight in the room, heavier than the crystal chandelier above us. It hurt more than their condescension because it proved how thoroughly they had broken her spirit. I reached into my bag and pulled out a thin manila folder. I did not slam it down. I placed it on the table gently, sliding it past the centerpiece until it rested next to Felicity's wine glass. I found the ownership transcript quite interesting, I said, my voice conversational. Especially the update processed at 2:13 in the morning, and the permit application for a cold storage facility filed by Dylan before the deed was even recorded. The table went quiet. Dylan shifted in his seat, his eyes darting to his father. Felicity didn't blink. She picked up her wine glass and took a sip. And bureaucracy is messy. Marianne, are you suggesting we forced her? Do you have proof of coercion, or just the ramblings of a mother who can't let go? She signaled a waiter, who promptly brought over a fresh document, bound in blue legal paper. She slid it toward Harper. Since we are all here, Felicity said, smiling warmly, let's put this to rest. This is a family stability agreement. It clarifies everyone's role so there is no more confusion. Harper, honey, just sign this, and your mother can stop worrying. Harper picked up the pen, her hand shaking. I feigned a look of hesitation, shrinking into my chair. I don't know. Maybe it is for the best. I just want Harper to be safe. The Ashfords exchanged a look of triumph. They thought I was folding. They thought the fight had left me. Let me just see it for a moment, Evelyn said, speaking up for the first time. She didn't wait for permission. She plucked the document from Harper's hand. Her eyes scanned the text rapidly. Section 4, paragraph B. Evelyn read aloud, her tone dry. In the event of marital separation or dissolution, the primary beneficiary waives all rights to residency on the property in favor of the managing agent. Evelyn looked up, locking eyes with Felicity. You aren't securing her future. You are pre-signing her eviction notice. Harper dropped the pen. The metal clattered against the china plate, a sharp sound that cut through the restaurant's murmur. Felicity's smile vanished. That is standard language for asset protection. I sat up straight. The act was over. I didn't scream. I didn't flip the table. I simply smiled. A cold, sharp expression that I used to wear when closing a deal that destroyed a rival. I will consider it, I said, lying through my teeth. But before we sign anything, I want to see the farm. Tonight. All of us. If we are going to be a family, we should stand on the land together. Fine, Grant grunted. 7 o'clock. Perfect, I said. 7 o'clock. I wanted them there in the dark. I wanted them on the ground when the trap snapped shut. The night air in Vermont was thick enough to choke on. Our convoy of 3 cars crunched over the gravel driveway, the headlights cutting through the darkness like searchlights. When we reached the main gate, Felicity stepped out of her Mercedes. She punched the code into the keypad with a flourish and swept her arm toward the open barrier, gesturing for me to enter. It was a performance of benevolence, as if she were graciously allowing me access to the very property I had paid for. I drove through, my eyes scanning the perimeter. The high beams of my car swept across the lower pasture near the creek line. I slammed on my brakes for a second before continuing. Stuck into the earth, gleaming with fresh fluorescent pink tape, were survey stakes. They were not marking property boundaries. They were marking subdivision lines. They had already partitioned the waterfront acreage to be sold off separately. We parked near the main barn. Harper got out of Dylan's car, looking like a prisoner being transferred between facilities. We walked into the barn, the smell of old hay and diesel hanging in the stagnant air. Grant walked with a proprietary stomp, inspecting the beams. "Grant," I said, keeping my voice neutral. I noticed fresh stakes near the creek. "Erosion control," Grant said too quickly. He didn't look at me. "Just marking the washout zones." Harper walked over to a stack of feed bags in the corner. She pulled one aside, likely looking for the barn cat, but froze. Hidden behind the sacks was a cardboard box. It had been hastily shoved there. The flap was open, revealing a thick binder labeled Redwood Meridian, Phase 2, Residential Concept. Harper pulled it out. Her hands were shaking so hard the plastic cover rattled. She opened it to the minutes of a meeting dated 3 days ago. "Dylan?" she whispered. This is your signature." Grant turned around, his face hardening. "Put that away, Harper. It is just a contingency plan." He looked at Dylan and muttered, low but audible in the quiet barn. "I told you to clear the site. Once the permit clears next week, we close." He caught my eye and immediately corrected himself. "We close? The loop on the financing?" I didn't say a word. I slipped my hand into my pocket and texted Miles, "Check the creek line coordinates. They are subdividing." Then I signaled Evelyn with a single nod. She stepped outside, already dialing the number for an independent appraiser to be here at first light. Just then, a beam of light swung across the driveway. An old pickup truck rumbled to a halt near the gate, and a woman in a heavy coat leaned out. It was Mrs. Gable, the nearest neighbor. "Harper," she called out, her voice carrying over the wind. "I just wanted to double-check. The moving company called me asking for directions for Thursday. They said the truck is huge, asked if they can turn around in my lot." Harper took a step forward. "Movers? I didn't hire movers." "Oh." Mrs. Gable looked confused. "The order said, full estate clearance. Thursday morning." The silence that followed was absolute. They weren't just selling the land. They were erasing Harper's existence from it within 48 hours. Dylan moved fast. He grabbed Harper by the elbow, his grip tight, and pulled her away from the group, toward the shadow of the tractor. He thought they were out of earshot. He thought I was distracted by Mrs. Gable. I drifted into the shadow of the barn door, my phone already recording in my hand. "Stop it," Dylan hissed at her. "You are acting like a child. You are embarrassing me. You are making my family look like criminals because you can't handle business. You are kicking me out," Harper stammered. "This is my home." "It is an asset," Dylan snapped, his voice vibrating with frustration. "I am doing this for us. You are too emotional to see the big picture. Stop fighting me. Just let it happen. Once sold, You will thank me. I stopped the recording. I had it. The admission of intent to sell, the coercion, the acknowledgement that it was happening against her will. I slid the phone back into my coat. The cold night air suddenly felt very refreshing. They thought they were cleaning house. They had no idea they had just handed me the match. I pulled Harper into the small guest bedroom of the farmhouse, away from the prying eyes of her in-laws who were still patrolling the property like they were guarding a vault. The air was cold, but my mind was burning with a precise, icy clarity. "Harper, look at me," I said, gripping her shoulders. "We are going to give them exactly what they want. You are going to tell them you agree to their temporary management. You will apologize for being difficult. You will be the submissive daughter-in-law they think they own." "But, Mom," Harper stammered, her eyes wide with panic. "If I do that, they will sell it." "No, they won't," I said. "Because you are going to sign a new agreement, one that I have written." I went to the kitchen table where Evelyn was already printing the document from her portable printer. We called it the Interim Stewardship Protocol. It looked incredibly bureaucratic, filled with pages of fluff about maintenance schedules and insurance liabilities, things Grant and Felicity would love because it sounded professional. But buried in Section 12 was a single, ironclad clause. All financial transactions, liens, or transfers of title require the countersigning of the trustee supervisor. And the trustee supervisor was me, while Harper went to play her part. I opened my laptop. I drafted an email to the director of acquisitions at Redwood Meridian. I used a tone of capitulation. I apologized for the confusion caused by family miscommunications and invited them to a final site survey tomorrow, promising that I would personally facilitate the expedited closing of the deal. I wanted the buyers there. I wanted them to see the train wreck in person. Simultaneously, I made a quiet call to the director of the Green Mountain Land Conservancy. We discussed a conservation easement. It was a legal tool that would permanently restrict the land from commercial development, regardless of who owned it. If the Ashfords somehow managed to steal the title, I would make sure the land became legally worthless to any developer. It was my scorched earth insurance policy. Just then, Miles walked into the room. He looked grim. He placed a credit report on the table. "Marianne, you need to see this," Miles said. "I ran a title search on the county database to check for existing encumbrances. There is a new lien on the property." I looked at the paper. A lien for $15,000 had been recorded 2 days ago against the farm. The stated purpose was legal retainer fees. The signatory was not Harper. It was Felicity Ashford, signing as authorized agent. "She took out a loan against a property she doesn't own yet," Evelyn said, her voice dropping to a whisper. "That is mortgage fraud." "Don't report it," I said instantly. "Not yet." "But, Marianne, this is a crime," Evelyn argued. "I know," I replied. "And that is why we keep it. It is not a crime scene yet. Evelyn, it is a noose, and I want them to stick their heads all the way through before we kick the chair." The next morning, I arranged to meet Felicity for coffee at a bakery in town. I wore no makeup. I wore a grey sweater that looked slightly too big, making me appear shrunken and defeated. Felicity arrived 10 minutes late, looking victorious. She ordered a cappuccino and didn't ask what I wanted. "I am glad you finally saw reason, Marianne," Felicity said, stirring her foam. "This fighting is bad for Harper's health." "I know," I said, forcing a tremor into my hand as I lifted my cup. I am just tired. Felicity, I am getting too old for these battles. I just want Harper to be taken care of. If you think your family can manage the estate better, then maybe it is for the best. You just make it look nice. Okay. Felicity's eyes gleamed. She leaned in, her guard completely down. She saw a broken old woman, and her ego swelled like a balloon. Oh, it will be beautiful, Felicity said, lowering her voice conspiratorially. In fact, at the county board meeting next week, I am planning a special announcement. We are going to present it as Harper gifting the farm to the Ashford Family Trust. It will be a wonderful story for the community, the prodigal daughter honoring her new family. I nodded slowly, hiding the predatory smile that threatened to break through my facade. That sounds very generous of you. It is, she agreed. We are a generous family. She had no idea. She was so busy planning her victory speech that she didn't notice she was standing on a trap door. And I was holding the lever. The Alder County Planning Board meeting was standing room only. The air inside the town hall was hot and smelled of floor wax and damp wool coats. It seemed half the town had squeezed onto the wooden benches, drawn by the rumour of a major development project. Felicity Ashford had treated the event not as a municipal hearing, but as a coronation. She had actually hired a photographer who was currently circling the front row, snapping photos of her and Grant as they shook hands with local council members. She wanted this recorded. She wanted the community to see the benevolent Ashford family saving the local economy. I sat in the very last row, squeezed between a radiator and a farmer who smelled of diesel. I kept my head down, my scarf wrapped high. To them, I was just another anonymous spectator. Dylan stood at the podium. He looked the part of the young visionary, wearing a crisp navy suit. He projected a slide showing a sleek, modern barn. This is not just about storage, Dylan said, his voice smooth and practiced. The Blue Hollow cold storage facility will allow local farmers to store produce longer, reducing waste and increasing profits. We are building this for the community. The board members nodded, impressed. But I was looking at the handout Evelyn had quietly obtained before the meeting started. It was the full proposal packet. Tucked away in Appendix C, labelled Future Expansion, was a map. It didn't show apple crates. It showed a cul-de-sac. It showed 12 luxury lots overlaid right where the farmhouse stood. The cold storage was a Trojan horse. I remained silent. I let him finish. I let him tie the noose tight around his own neck. Thank you, Mr. Ashford, the board chairman said. We have the owner of record listed as Harper Ashford. Is she present to confirm her consent for the zoning variance? Grant stood up, buttoning his jacket. My daughter-in-law is here, but she prefers to let the men handle the technical details. She is fully on board. Actually, a voice cut through the room. It was shaky, barely a whisper, but it stopped the chairman's gavel. Harper stood up. She was trembling so violently that the chair in front of her rattled, but she was standing. I would like to speak, Harper said. Grant glared at her, his eyes wide with a warning. Felicity's smile froze into a rictus of panic. Harper walked to the microphone. She gripped the sides of the podium until her knuckles were white. I do not consent to this application, Harper said. Her voice gained a fraction of strength. I was forced to sign the authorization papers. I did not know they planned to destroy my home. The room erupted. Chairs scraped against the floor as people leaned forward. The murmurs turned into a roar. Grant jumped up. Mr. Chairman, please, my daughter-in-law is currently suffering from severe emotional instability. She is under medication. She doesn't know what she is saying. Felicity immediately covered her mouth, producing a theatrical sob. Oh, poor Harper. We tried to keep this private. She is having an episode. Please. We need to get her out of here. That was the signal. I stood up. I shed the heavy scarf. I walked down the center aisle, followed closely by Evelyn Shaw. The sound of my heels on the hardwood floor cut through the noise. She is perfectly sane, I said, my voice projecting clearly to the back of the room. And she is not the one lying to this board. Evelyn stepped forward and slammed a thick file onto the chairman's table. This is a formal notice of fraud, Evelyn announced. We are submitting evidence of coercion, unauthorized access to digital property, and intent to deceive. Evelyn pulled out a small digital speaker and pressed play. Dylan's voice, clear and arrogant, filled the silent hall. Once sold, you will thank me. Then she held up a blown-up printout of the email time-stamped at 2:13 in the morning. This transfer request was made while the owner was asleep. Evelyn stated. And here is the original trust document, proving that Harper Ashford did not have the legal authority to sell this land without the countersignature of the trustee. Me. The twist happened in the third row. 2 men in expensive grey suits stood up. They were the representatives from Redwood Meridian. They had come to watch their investment clear the final hurdle. Instead, they were watching a felony unfold. Mr. Chairman, one of the suits said, checking his watch. Redwood Meridian is withdrawing its letter of intent immediately. We were assured this title was clean. We do not do business like this. They didn't even look at Dylan as they walked out. They fled the room as if it were on fire. The colour drained from Dylan's face. The deal was dead. The money was gone. The reputation he had built was dissolving in real time. He panicked. He turned away from the board and pointed a shaking finger at me. This is crazy, Dylan shouted, his voice cracking. She is the one doing this. She just wants to control her daughter. She can't stand that Harper loves us more. The room went deadly silent, waiting for my explosion, waiting for the mother to scream back. I didn't say a word. I didn't even look at him. I turned my gaze solely to my daughter. I don't need to control you, Harper, I said softly. I just need you to tell them the truth. Harper looked at Dylan, then at the stunned crowd, and finally at me. She took a breath. I don't want to be managed, Harper said, her voice finally steady. I want freedom. The silence that followed the planning board meeting was not the silence of peace. It was the heavy, pressurized silence of a submarine diving too deep. The Ashfords did not scream or make a scene in the parking lot. Instead, they retreated to their strategy of whispers. By the next morning, their tactics had shifted. Felicity sent a courier with a heavy envelope. It contained a proposal for a private reconciliation. The terms were deceptively simple. They would drop all claims to the land management if I signed a document formally removing myself as the trustee supervisor. They claimed it was to restore marital trust between Dylan and Harper. I sat in the small living room of the farmhouse, watching my daughter read the letter. Harper looked hollowed out. The fight had drained her, leaving only a trembling shell. I did this, Harper whispered, staring at the floor. I brought this war here. If I hadn't been so weak, maybe none of this would be happening. Stop, I said, sitting beside her on the worn sofa. This is not your fault, and I didn't create the trust to control you. Harper, I created it because I was 22 once. She looked up, surprised. I had never spoken about my early years. I had a partner when I started in real estate. I continued softly. He was charming. He told me I was brilliant. I signed over my first 2 buildings to a joint holding company because he said it would save on taxes. He leveraged them to the hilt, took the cash, and vanished to Brazil. I was left with 0 assets and $300,000 in debt. I spent 10 years digging myself out. I built that trust so no one could ever do that to you. Harper's eyes filled with tears, but before she could answer, the back door creaked open. It was Dylan. He didn't barge in. He walked in slowly, carrying a bag of groceries. He looked defeated. His shoulders slumped. His arrogance replaced by a boyish vulnerability that I recognized instantly as his most dangerous weapon. Dylan said gently, ignoring me completely. I brought your favorite soup. Look, I know I messed up. I got carried away trying to build something for us. I just wanted to prove I could be the provider you deserve. He knelt beside her, resting his head on her knee. I am sorry. Please, let's just fix this. Just us. No lawyers. Harper hesitated. Her hand hovered over his hair. She wanted to believe him. The instinct to forgive was hardwired into her. But later that afternoon, the illusion shattered. While Dylan was in the shower, Harper's phone pinged with a notification from a credit monitoring service I had insisted she install months ago. She opened it, and I watched the color drain from her face until she looked like a corpse. Mom? She choked out. What is this? I took the phone. It was an alert for a new hard credit inquiry. A loan application had been submitted to a private lender for $75,000. The applicant was Harper Ashford. The stated purpose was business investment, initial capital. I didn't apply for a loan, Harper said, her voice rising in panic. I didn't sign anything. I scrolled down. The application date was 2 days ago. Dylan hadn't just tried to sell the farm. He had taken out a high-interest loan in Harper's name to pay for the buy-in required by the Redwood Meridian deal. If the sale fell through, the Ashfords wouldn't lose a dime. Harper would be left with the debt. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. This wasn't just about stealing an asset. It was about turning my daughter into a debt shield. They were using her credit like a disposable resource. He isn't trying to build a future, I said, my voice cold as steel. He is hedging his bets with your financial life. Evelyn, who was working at the kitchen table, stood up immediately. We need to file for an emergency injunction. I can get a judge to freeze everything within 2 hours. We sue for identity theft and fraud. No, I said. Evelyn stared at me. Marianne, he is committing a felony in real time. If we sue now, it becomes a long, messy divorce battle, I said, pacing the room. They will claim it was a misunderstanding. They will claim Harper verbally authorized it. It will drag on for years, and Harper will never be free of them. I turned to the window. I could see Dylan outside, whistling as he chopped wood, playing the role of the devoted husband. I'm going to sign their paper, I said. What? Harper and Evelyn asked in unison. I will agree to the reconciliation, I said, turning back to them. I will tell them I am tired and I want to go home. We will set up a signing at the town notary tomorrow. I will sign the document that removes me as the trustee. Mom, you can't, Harper cried. They will take everything. I am going to sign, I repeated, a dark smile touching my lips. But I am going to sign a version of the document that triggers a specific clause they didn't bother to read because they were too busy counting their money. We are going to let them walk right into the cage and lock the door themselves. I looked at Evelyn. Call the notary. And then call the state financial crimes inspector. Tell him I have a present for him. And he needs to be sitting in the back office at 10 o'clock sharp. The notary's office was stiflingly hot. Felicity and Grant sat on one side of the mahogany table, a stack of documents arranged in a neat pile before them. They looked like predators waiting for a wounded animal to finally collapse. Harper sat in the middle, her posture hunched. Dylan stood behind her, his hand resting on the back of her neck. To an outsider, it looked like a comforting gesture. To me, it looked like he was holding her in place. Just sign here, M, Dylan said softly, holding out a pen. Then the stress goes away. We can just be a family again. Harper reached for the pen, her hand trembling. Felicity's eyes widened slightly, a flash of greed she could not suppress. I apologize for the delay, I said, stepping into the room. The air in the room shifted instantly. I did not come alone. Evelyn Shaw walked in beside me, carrying her briefcase like a weapon. Behind us walked two men, a federally licensed notary I had booked personally, and a man wearing a windbreaker with the county seal on the pocket, the senior financial crimes inspector for Alder County. Marianne, Grant said, standing up. This is a private family meeting. Who are these people? Witnesses, I said. I walked past him and took the seat next to Harper. I am ready to sign the transfer of authority. I pulled a document from my own bag. It looked identical to the one they had prepared, but the header was different. I uncapped my pen. But first, I said, looking at Dylan, I need to clarify the terms. By signing this, I am activating the dormant clause in the original deed. It is called the Protection of Beneficiary Provision. I signed my name with a flourish. What does that mean? Felicity snapped. It means, Evelyn said, stepping forward, that as of this second, the farm has been transferred out of the revocable trust and into the Harper Caldwell Independent Trust. The sole beneficiary is Harper. Any individual with a proven conflict of interest or evidence of financial malfeasance is permanently barred from the title. That means you, Dylan, and you, Felicity. You can't do that, Grant shouted. I just did, I replied. Evelyn slammed a folder onto the table. This is a temporary restraining order granted by Judge Miller an hour ago. It freezes all assets and loans connected to Harper's Social Security number. It also initiates a formal investigation into the $15,000 loan taken out against the property 2 days ago. The inspector stepped forward. He held up a photocopy of the loan application. Mrs. Ashford, we have a forensic analysis of the signature on this document. It matches your handwriting, not Harper's. That is bank fraud in the second degree. Felicity turned pale. She looked at Grant, but he was staring at the wall, realizing the game was over. You are destroying this family. Felicity shrieked, her voice cracking. Marianne, you are a bitter, hateful woman. Harper needs us. She needs a lawyer, the inspector said dryly. And so do you. Then I turned to Dylan. He was backing away toward the door, sweat beading on his forehead. "And you," I said. "We found the emails between you and the broker at Redwood Meridian. You guaranteed them a sale closing by Friday. Why the rush?" "Dylan, I was just trying to maximize the market value." Dylan stammered. "Liar," I said. I tossed the credit report onto the table. "You owe $50,000 to a private investment group in Chicago. You leveraged a margin account and lost it all. You needed the farm sale to pay your bookie before they broke your legs." The silence that followed was absolute. Harper slowly stood up. She turned to look at her husband. You gambled it," Harper whispered. "You told me it was for our future. You told me I was stupid for not understanding business, but you just needed cash to cover your debt." Please," Dylan begged, reaching for her hand. "I can fix it. I just need a little time." "Don't listen to her." Harper didn't flinch. She didn't cry. She reached into Evelyn's folder and pulled out a document we had prepared that morning. It was a petition for legal separation and a revocation of all spousal powers of attorney. She signed it. The sound of the pen scratching against the paper was the loudest noise in the room. "Get away from me," Harper said. She didn't scream it. She said it with the cold, final authority of a woman who was done being a victim. "If you contact me again, my mother's lawyer will put you in jail." Dylan looked at the papers, then at the inspector blocking the door, and slumped into a chair, burying his face in his hands. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I simply stood up, took Harper's arm, and walked her out of the office, leaving the Ashfords to drown in the mess they had made. An hour later, we were back at the farm. The sun was setting, casting long golden shadows across the fields. Harper walked to the front gate. She climbed up the stone pillar and ripped down the vinyl banner that read, "Ashford Family Appreciation Day." She crumpled it into a ball and threw it into the back of my trunk. Then, she pulled out the wooden sign I had commissioned for her. She hung it on the hooks herself. It swung gently in the breeze. "Caldwell Farm Working Land. Honest Hands." I walked over and handed her the wooden box containing the antique wind chimes. "You don't need to run anymore," I said softly. "This place isn't for hiding. It is for you to breathe." Harper took the chimes. She looked at the house, then at me. She didn't say thank you. She didn't need to. She just stood straight, her shoulders finally light, and walked through her own front gate. I stayed back, leaning against my car, watching my daughter take her first step into a life that was finally, truly, hers. Thanks for listening to this story. Let me know in the comments where you are tuning in from. I love seeing how far these stories travel. If you enjoyed this takedown, please smash that like button. Subscribe to Nora Revenge Stories for more satisfying drama, and hit the hype button to help this video reach more people. See you in the next one.